about those good things all the time, so it's our job to do that. It takes a lot of capital and a lot of investment to build a ground game and to turn out the vote. It is a very, very fine-tooled operation. We'll get up to, how many staff will we get up to by the end of 2020? How many? 1,200 paid staff around the country with hundreds of thousands of volunteers across the country. And so it takes a lot of capital. We'll probably raise close to $300 million. We raised $300 million last cycle, probably well above $300 million for this cycle. And it takes a lot to do that. So that's what the party structure does. When candidates have very defined giving limits, they need the party to help build the road to get to their destination. I always say, I'm a Detroit girl, we're building the road so the cars can drive on it. You need both, and our focus is voter turnout and get out the vote and absentee chase and all these fun things with data and digital and door knocking. And so that's what the RNC does in a nutshell. And one of the reasons I love this job is I'm so thrilled with what this administration has done. I come from a state that was decimated when we moved there from Michigan. In 2008, when we had the collapse heard around the country, the economic collapse, Michigan had already been suffering. We had a Democrat governor who had instilled policies that were destroying business in our state, and we felt it. It's personal when you see your friends losing their homes. It's personal when you have neighbors filing for bankruptcy who've lived in your state for 20 years and having to leave because they can't find a job. I had good friends who defaulted on their home, lost their home because he lost his job. He was an engineer. He had to go live in another state to provide for his family. And that was what was coming to our state because of really bad policies. We had a Michigan business tax that was preventing businesses from coming to our state. The regulatory environment was so high. It was just decimating us. Part of the reason I got so involved in politics was because I saw our schools suffering, because our government couldn't pass a budget because they couldn't get along. That is not how government's supposed to function. So we in Michigan flipped it. We elected a Republican governor, a businessman, sound familiar, who flipped our state around. He got rid of the Michigan business tax, he lowered the regulations, and suddenly we started to boom again, and our home prices went up and wages went up, and suddenly Michigan became a place that people could live in again. And that is what we have seen with President Trump. He saw in our state that wages were stagnant, that people had lost hope in Washington, that people who didn't have lobbyists and special interests had no voice. And so what has happened with this administration to expand our economy has really been phenomenal. By putting the tax cuts in place that lowered the corporate tax, by putting the deregulation in place, things like Dodd-Frank that were stymieing investment and lending and the ability for people to start small businesses. So many of the things that this administration have done has really opened up our economy. And as a result, I just want to go through some of the things that are happening right now. One, we have high wage growth for the first time in a decade, over 3% wage growth. We had none of that under Obama. Our GDP is topping out at 3%. We were stagnant under President Obama for 8 years. We have added, since President Trump has taken office, 5 million new jobs. 5 million new jobs. Over 50% of them have been filled by women. Our unemployment rate is under 4%. And it is the lowest in history for African American and Hispanics. It is at a low for women, a 65-year low for women. Those are the things that are shaping our economy and changing our country. And that is why this president and the policies that he is instilling is totally uplifting families. And the number I love the most out of this administration is, since President Trump has taken office, over 4 million families have come off of food stamps. What does that mean? When somebody can take their family off of food stamps because they found a job and they found a good wage, think about what that means for the future of their family. And those are the things that are happening because of the Trump administration, not to mention investing in our veterans, giving them the Choice and Accountability Act so they can have access to good health care, not to mention taking on ISIS and defeating the caliphate, not to mention drawing the red line with Syria, actually enforcing the red line that Obama had put forward and acting when they used chemical weapons on men and women, women and children, and not to mention what happened with North Korea, something that's very important to the people here of Guam, taking on Kim Jong-un and not allowing him to just have free reign and actually saying, we're going to stand up to you because we are the United States of America. The judges, so many great things have come out of this administration. So I love my job every day because I know that we're doing good things that are making people's lives better, and we're gearing up for 2020. And I'm happy to talk to any of you about the good things that we see out of this administration every single day. I also get to work with President Trump a lot, and those are questions I get quite often. What's it like to work with this president? Well, I have such a great relationship with him, and being only the second woman ever in history to run the party and to be the first reelected because he selected me, I talk to him a great deal. This is a president that respects women, puts women in high positions like Elaine Chao, like Betsy DeVos, Kellyanne Conway, Gina Haspel. The list goes on and on. And I don't think many other people would have said, let's go pluck this mom out of Michigan and let's put her in charge of the Republican Party for the whole country. But he is respectful, he's constantly helping us, and somebody that I truly enjoy working with. So we're gearing up for 2020 at an RNC level. We're ready to keep things going, and we have a great record to run on. And let's contrast that with what Democrats are right now proposing. And I think as a chamber, it's important for you to pay attention to what many of the candidates are proposing, especially this Green New Deal, which would cost $93 trillion. And for every household would be about $300,000 in taxes per household. It is something that would devastate our economy. Many of the Democrats are pushing more and more government control of our economy, full government control of healthcare, full government control of our education. That sounds great, but who's going to pay for it, right? When you have the government take over, what is the quality going to be of our healthcare? What's the quality going to be of our education? So these are discussions that we're going to have heading into 2020. Personally, I think it's crazy that they're saying, let's redo our whole economy when we are on a roll and things are doing well and the GDP is great and wage growth is up and jobs are coming back. So it's an interesting conversation we're going to be having. And part of the reason I wanted to come here and talk to all of you, one is to hear your concerns, to learn about the islands. Your delegation here advocate so well for Guam, and they want to make sure that the administration is hearing the issues that you're dealing with. I know the H-2 visas are some of the issues that you're dealing with. I know that there are other issues that you're hearing, but I wanted to listen, learn, tell you how much I appreciate you, and also be able to be a voice for the islands and for Guam in Washington, D.C. as I talk to lawmakers and to the administration. Because I don't think people realize not only does America's Day begin in Guam, America's defense begins in Guam too. So thank you for what you do. Thank you for what you mean to America. And I'm just honored and privileged to be here. God bless each and every one of you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you. I'd be happy to take some questions if anybody has any. Sure. Hi.
I'm an Army retiree.
Thank you for your service.
You're very welcome. But here in Guam and the region, we have more soldiers or more of our citizens in the military than most states do.
Per capita, you have 1 in 8
Yeah.
that serve in the military, and it's the largest per capita than anybody else.
In this war on terror, we've lost a lot of our citizens, young men and women. And so I want you to know that when you push back against Congressman Ilhan Omar with those incendiary comments she made at CARE, I was really proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. One, I'm so impressed with the patriotism of Guam. And like you said, so many of you have served in our military. Thank you so much. Thank you for your service. What I did is nothing compared to what you have done, so thank you. But I do think it's something that we need to discuss. I hope you've seen, the Congresswoman from Minnesota, Ilhan Omar, came out, she spoke to a group and said that 9/11 was something that some people did. We found that egregious. 30,000 lives were lost on that day. It precipitated, obviously, a war that lost thousands and thousands of lives, people who served our country. And I think her language was inappropriate. Instead of apologizing, instead of saying, I'm sorry, I don't mean to demean the loss of life and what 9/11 meant for our country. She doubled down. And by being called out, her leaders are now saying that her life and she's having attacks on her. Of course we don't want that. We don't want people to attack her or threaten her, but her actions do need to be called out. You cannot say that and not apologize. And that's part of what our country stands for. So I'm always going to do that. I'm surprised that Democrat leadership isn't. I'm surprised that they're doubling down, because this is something that should be nonpartisan. To say, you know what, we need to speak about 9/11 with reverence, just like we speak about Pearl Harbor. These are the types of things that bring Americans together. And I think her comments were egregious, along with many other comments that she has made since she served in Congress. And her record and her comments are absolutely open for discussion and for criticism. She's in a public role. I would never advocate anyone harming her or threatening her. That's not what I'm going to say. But you bet I'm going to disagree with her every single time when it comes to our veterans, our country, and the love that we have for the United States of America. Thank you. It's Frank, right? Yes. Frank from Columbia. No, I'm just kidding. I know, yeah. I know because my sister-in-law's from Columbia, so we connected. Yeah, yeah.
I know that Juan Carlos will try to translate, but my question is in regards to healthcare. What do you foresee in the next year and a half and after the re-election in regards to changes in healthcare, in regards to prescription drugs and bringing that cost down, and in regards to Medicare for all that is being announced by basically every single Democratic candidate?
Yeah, I think one of the most unfortunate things that's happening with this very vitriolic and divisive political environment, and I think we all know that that's there. I don't know if you see it as much here in Guam as we see it in the airports and all across Michigan in my state, but we're not having a really substantive discussion about what Democrats are proposing. So what you have on the left, you have Bernie Sanders and many proposing Medicare for all, and actually saying let's get rid of 180 private health care plans. So if you are provided insurance by your health care provider, that option would no longer be available to you. I don't think a lot of people would like that. One of the things that we've seen with Obamacare and the struggles that Obamacare has brought to many families is you don't have health care, you have health insurance with deductibles that are so high that it's preventing people from actually getting the care they need. I'll give you an example. I was sitting next to a woman in my hair salon in Michigan. She was asking me what I did, and I'm like, I don't really know if I want to tell her what I do, because I'm going to be here for 2 hours getting my hair done, and it could go one of two ways, right? But I told her I was at the time, I was the head of the Michigan Republican Party. And we were talking about Obamacare. This is pre-President Trump's election. And she started to break down. She said, I have a private business. We have a family-owned business. We were forced off of our health care. We had to change plans. We immediately had to subscribe to Obamacare. And then my husband had a medical issue where he had to get a stent in his heart. And the deductible was $10,000. And she started weeping. Not only did her cost go up per month, $200 or $300, imagine what that's like for a family to add that to their budget, but then to have a life-saving procedure that you need to have a $10,000 deductible. So healthcare is a discussion we need to have, not health insurance, not Obama insurance. It's actually the care that people are going to get. So this Medicare for all, it sounds great, but I think it will reduce the quality of healthcare, and it will make huge waits. I say it with my pediatrician. You can't get in anymore because so many people have come into the system, and we just don't have the capacity with the doctors and the nurses, and we all know this, to deal with it. So we have to tackle this. The Republicans are working on a plan. I think the president has said we need to present an alternative. One of them is let's block grant the money back to the states, let the states craft plans that are specific to their uninsured, take it more local, maintain that doctor-patient relationship. I think that's so critical. I don't think many people want the government making decisions and putting it in Washington, D.C., making decisions on your health care. I don't want a panel or anybody deciding, well, this person is this age and they have this criteria, so they don't deserve a heart procedure. keeping it local with the doctors is so important, allowing people to have that. So it really is two different paths to go. We absolutely have a healthcare problem. We need to make sure people have quality healthcare. The way the Democrats are going will actually worsen the quality of the healthcare. So we will see this discussion play out. It was interesting this last election, the pre-existing conditions coverage was a huge part of the 2018 election. Republicans do not want to take pre-existing condition coverage away. That's not part of it. But it is critical that we craft better health care and access for Americans, and I think the president's going to lead on that issue.
Thank
Oh,
you.
hey.
Hi, I saw you
Again,
this
yeah.
morning.
Yeah, I saw you this morning.
You talked a little about the colleges and universities, and it seems like a lot of the messages aren't getting through to the college, the youth, because I think it's so important to have a fair understanding of both parties and the true agenda, and not just topical social media type of understanding of it. What is the RNC doing to get to these young individuals?
That is such a great question, because millennials as a group, and I hate always defining one group, but typically don't identify as a party even as much. They don't say I'm Republican or Democrat. They're more issue-based. But they also are not identifying as Republican right now. So we have a lot of work to do on these campuses. So one of the things we've instilled at the RNC is we have an RLI training. It's mostly with young millennials. It's a whole 6-week course. We teach them everything about the campaign, and then we deploy them on the campuses. So last cycle, we trained over 25,000 of these across the country, these RLI fellows. Previously, in 2016, it was 5,000. We have a much higher goal for 2018. It's got to be word of mouth. Most people are influenced by their friends, by their peers. Most people change their mind in those one-on-one conversations. I think most people recognize the news media has their bent, one or the other, but when you're really going to have a substantive discussion, it's going to be with somebody you trust, who you know. So having these millennials taught through the RNC, getting involved in their college Republican groups, creating college Republican groups on campus, and then other groups like Turning Point USA that are out there really engaging with millennials. When I go to college campuses, I go. I've gone to a few and spoken. I'm not always the most welcome person, but going to the University of Chicago, which I've been to, or Georgetown, which I appreciate them giving me that opportunity, and just challenging maybe the way you've thought about things. We have to just say, hey, maybe you should look at it a different way. When you have universities say to you, oh, tuition's too high, tuition's so high, it's cost prohibitive, which, by the way, it is so high for a lot of these universities. Guess who's creating the tuition prices for you? Usually your Board of Regents or your Board of Trustees, and who are those? Democrats, okay? So let's look at who's running your university. And yes, every single one of these kids, they think they're gonna be the next Bill Gates. They're gonna go be the next entrepreneur. They're gonna go change the world. Well, not in the regulatory environment the Democrats want. When you talk to small business owners, when they talked about what was happening to them with Dodd-Frank, with all the things that they were dealing with Obamacare, with the regulatory restrictions that were being put on them, we had a huge problem under President Obama where actually we had more small businesses failing than were being created, okay? So this is a huge factor with what President Trump has done by unleashing that capital, giving that opportunity, by pulling back the regulations. You know, every big business started in a garage or an office or a home office. If you have an environment that doesn't allow that to grow, you're not gonna get anywhere. And these kids, when they hear that, when they think about that, they go, oh, I never thought about regulation. It's boring. But it's a huge factor in what their potential is gonna be. And then finally, do you want a job when you graduate from college? Because you've got this student debt. You've got this massive student debt. And boy, the Democrats, they say, we're gonna pay it off. It's gonna all be free. Baloney. You're gonna be paying off it the rest of your life. And by the way, you may not have a job after you get out of college if we continue down this path. So just putting some common sense and talking to them about it a little bit more makes a difference. But it's a challenge in the media environment that we have. That's why the RNC is so important, because building that ground game and having those one-on-one conversations 2 years before an election helps make the difference with those types of voters. Any other questions? Or I don't know what our time frame is.
Yes, hi.
Oh, sure.
You know, I'm a Trump supporter, and I appreciate all the point that you mentioned earlier about what he's done so far. But your silence on the border security crisis is deafening. I'm wondering why you didn't care to mention about that, and maybe you can talk a little more about that. And then maybe on a personal note is that if your uncle decides, or when he decides to run for the presidency, how is that going to affect you?
Wow, softballs, huh? Half a day, see you later. I'm going to the beach now. Great questions. Well, I certainly don't mean to be silent on the border security issue. And I was with the president in Texas last week, and it was actually fascinating. We were in San Antonio, and we were actually doing a fundraiser. And we had a group of maybe 15 people around the table talking to the president, and every single person, he asked, you know, you're on the border, tell me, or many of you have ranches or know the issue. He said, tell me what you're seeing. And many of them said, one, it's increased substantially the amount of crossings they're seeing on their properties, that they can't go out at night, that they have to have weapons if they're going to open their gates. They're finding dead bodies, that these coyotes are bringing people across and promising them passage into the United States, and then leave them at the border. And then many of these people who've come here for good reasons have come here, but have been taken advantage of, are dying as they're crossing the heat in Texas. So, and all of them agreed that a wall would be helpful. Every single person. So the president said, this is President Trump. It's never a dull day with President Trump. He's like, hey, we've got press here. Why don't we bring the press in for a press conference? And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is not, I don't know if we can do this, because it was just me. And Sarah Sanders was with us, and she had not come to the stop with us. And he said, let's do this. So I asked everybody, I want to make sure you're comfortable with this. Are you comfortable talking on TV? And every single person said, please, because our stories are not being told. It is a crisis. When you have Jay Johnson from the Obama administration saying this is a crisis, when just last month 100,000 people were apprehended at the border, that is, you know, not far from the population of Guam, about half, but it's the city of Albany. I mean, we just do not have the capacity to deal with it. So just a few statistics. Asylum claims are up 1,700% in the past 8 years, okay? 1,700%. Our courts have an 800,000 backlog in cases. We do not have the judicial capacity to process these cases, and we do not have the border infrastructure to deal with this deluge. It is a huge crisis. It should not be partisan. It's interesting that when this news story came out that the president was going to put people in the sanctuary cities, which I don't know if that's true, and I certainly have not talked to the president about that policy, how many Democrats said, oh, that's awful. That's awful. Well, you're the ones saying, let's have illegal crossings, let's let everybody in, let's have open borders, let's let everybody vote, but oh wait, don't come to my city. So really? So I think it is something that really highlighted in Texas. There's a humanitarian issue with these people who are coming here for good reasons being taken advantage of, but it's something that we need to solve for our country. So I hope that answers that question. The president's leading on it. I hope Congress will come to the table. We've never had a more divided Congress than we have right now, ever. I think we would all want our government to work and function. And what you've seen from the Democrats is they're just not willing to work with this president. They do not like him. They don't want to work with him. And that's not what we want for the future of America. On my Uncle Mitt, I don't think he's going to run for president. So I'm not even going to entertain that hypothetical, okay? But I'll tell him you asked, okay? All right. I'll take one more. Is that right? I can take two more. Okay. Yeah. Oh.
Hafa Adai.
Former First Lady Hafa Adai. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm glad you recognize that Guam's very patriotic. You know, we have a lot of veterans in Guam, and I don't think they're getting their due diligence and due fair share of what's being given out in America or like in Hawaii. When I was First Lady, actually we've gotten some support, but we're very little compared to what the Hawaiians would get, the Hawaiian veterans, or in California. We really need help. Can you please find a way to help our veterans here in Guam? They're desperate.
Well, I really appreciate that. Thank you. And I would want your veterans to get the care they deserve. So if you can get us information, we will be happy to take that to the Senate or anybody that you would like us to take that to in Washington. Obviously, I don't create policy. And that's part of why I'm here, is learning about the issues that you have and being able to have conversations. Guam is so important to the United States of America, to our country. So we need to make sure that we're listening to these issues.
I appreciate that, and I'll make sure the veterans office, the veterans get
Thank
that
you.
message and provide the information to
And thank you for all
Just
you
that.
do. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're wonderful.
enjoy Guam.
Thank you. And last one, if there's anyone, or I'm off the hook and I get to go to the beach. Oh, there is one more. Oh, I love your
Hi,
dress.
half a day.
So beautiful, half a day.
Thank you. You know, being born and raised here on Guam and having seen all the different administrations growing up, my question is, will Guam ever get to vote for president?
I don't know. I'm not treading on that one. I don't know. I really can't even foresee that. And I'm not foresee that it will never happen. Just that's not in my area of expertise. What I will say is that you send delegates to the Republican convention, and you have a large delegation that determines who the nominee is for our party. And I was talking to Juan Carlos and Margaret today. We really value the role that your Guam delegation plays on the RNC, and I think that's important, especially now when you've changed your party affiliation for your governor and your congressional member as a Democrat, that you have a delegation from the RNC here that is taking those issues and the importance of issues that you're facing to Washington, D.C. And we try and help facilitate meetings for them and make sure that Guam is being represented. So thank you. Sorry, I can't answer the voting question. All right, are we all set? One more.
Thank you for coming to Guam and
Thank you.
addressing the meeting today. I'm a lifetime Republican.
Yay!
That represents many years. When you look at me, you know that.
Not at all. You're a young chicken. You're a spring chicken.
Before the general election, there's a primary election.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question to you is, are you entertaining, other than your uncle maybe, of other people stepping in to participate in the primary election on the Republican Party?
I just want, our president has unprecedented approval within our party, over 90%. I just don't see any challenge, and I'm being candid, I just don't see any challenge going anywhere. I travel the country. He has such significant support in states like Iowa and New Hampshire and those battleground states. So I'm not entertaining anybody being our nominee except Donald Trump. So, thank you. All right. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Have a great day.
Well, thank you for that very much. We'd like to honor you with a small token of our appreciation. We have a pictorial of the FESPAC activities that happened in Guam a couple of years ago that brought together 25 island nations and cultures, and photographed by a Pulitzer Prize winning photographer from Guam.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you
Thank
so much.
you.
You want to get a picture? Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And with that, the meeting is adjourned.
Who told them that we were vegans here? Hi, how are you? Who told them we're on diets here? Mark, what did you tell them? I know.
Yeah, that's cool. Next time. We still get to see you everywhere. Yeah, yeah.